Love is a miracle. A girl helps a stranger, misses her interview, unaware he's a millionaire CEO, and changes her life. The cold drizzle soaked through Emma Carter's thin coat as she stood on the busy sidewalk of Manhattan, arm raised desperately. Yellow taxis zoomed past, splashing water onto the pavement, but not one stopped for her. "Come on, please," she muttered under her breath, glancing at her watch. 8:27 a.m. She had less than half an hour to reach Thorne Enterprises for what could be the most important interview of her life. A black sedan slowed near the curb, and Emma took a hopeful step forward, only to watch a businessman in an expensive suit slide in before she could reach it. She let out a frustrated sigh and checked her phone. No ride-sharing apps had cars available nearby, and taking the subway now would be cutting it too close. "Are you kidding me?" she groaned, her heartbeat picking up as she calculated her rapidly shrinking window of time. Just as she was about to turn and sprint toward the nearest bus stop, a disturbance on the sidewalk caught her eye. A man in a dark gray suit staggered near a lamppost, one hand clutching his chest. His neatly combed dark hair was damp from the rain, and though he exuded wealth and power, there was something undeniably fragile about the way he swayed. Then, suddenly, he collapsed. Emma's breath hitched. For a second, she hesitated. People walked past him without a second glance, too busy, too indifferent, or simply assuming someone else would step in. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. If she helped him, she would be late, possibly too late. This interview was her chance, a dream job, a career breakthrough. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she took a single step toward the street. A taxi was approaching. Then she heard a weak, pained gasp from the man on the ground. Emma spun back. Without another thought, she rushed to his side, kneeling on the wet pavement. "Sir? Can you hear me?" His breathing was shallow, his forehead slicked with sweat despite the cold. Up close she could see his sharp jawline and the slight furrow in his brow, like a man unused to weakness. "Help," he murmured hoarsely. Emma grabbed his wrist, checking for a pulse, faint but present. "You're going to be okay," she said, more to reassure herself than him. She fumbled for her phone and quickly dialed 911. "I have a man mid-30s collapsed on 5th Avenue near East 42nd. He's conscious but weak, possibly cardiac-related. Please send an ambulance." "Help is on the way," the operator confirmed. Emma exhaled in relief but realized that she couldn't leave now, not yet. She shrugged off her coat and carefully placed it under his head, shielding him from the cold pavement. He blinked up at her, dazed, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers for a moment. "Just leave me," he murmured, voice barely audible. Emma scoffed. "Yeah, that's not happening." Footsteps rushed past, people barely sparing a glance. Emma's mind raced. If she ran now, she might still make it in time. But she couldn't. Minutes stretched, the city buzzing around them like nothing was happening. Emma held his wrist, feeling the weak but steady thump of his heartbeat beneath her fingers. Then sirens. The ambulance pulled up, flashing red and blue against the gray sky. 2 paramedics jumped out, quickly assessing the situation. "He just collapsed," Emma explained, standing back as they lifted him onto a stretcher. "I think it might be his heart." The older paramedic nodded. "Good thing you stayed with him. This could have been worse." Emma felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. 8:56 a.m. Her heart plummeted. She was supposed to be at the Thorne Enterprises building 5 minutes ago. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Her interview was over. All because she had stopped for a stranger. Emma sprinted up the steps of Thorne Enterprises, her chest heaving as she pushed through the revolving glass doors. The sleek, modern lobby stretched before her, polished marble floors, high ceilings, and a massive chandelier casting a golden glow. The receptionist, a woman in a crisp navy blazer, barely glanced up as Emma hurried forward, breathless. I'm here for the executive assistant interview," Emma panted, gripping the counter as she tried to catch her breath. She was drenched from the rain, her hair sticking to her forehead, and her shoes squeaked embarrassingly against the marble. The receptionist finally looked up, raising a perfectly arched eyebrow. "Your name?" "Emma Carter." There was a pause as the woman typed on her keyboard. Then, she glanced back at Emma with a detached expression. "I'm sorry, Ms. Carter," she said smoothly. "The interviews ended 30 minutes ago." Emma's stomach dropped. No, please," she stammered. "I had an emergency." "I?" She hesitated, then quickly added, "I helped someone who collapsed on the street. I couldn't just leave him there." The receptionist gave a tight, professional smile, the kind meant to dismiss, not sympathize. "I understand, but Mr. Reynolds, our hiring manager, was very clear about punctuality. The final candidates have already been selected." Emma clenched her fists, frustration and desperation twisting inside her. "Please, just let me talk to him. I promise I won't take much of his time." The receptionist hesitated, as if debating whether Emma was worth the trouble. Then, with a sigh, she picked up the phone and dialed an extension. "Mr. Reynolds? I have a candidate here, Emma Carter. She missed her time slot but is requesting a moment of your time." A brief silence, then a short, clipped reply on the other end. "Understood," the receptionist said, hanging up. She turned back to Emma. "He'll see you, but only for a moment." Relief washed over Emma as she followed the woman down a long hallway. She was led into a minimalist office where Daniel Reynolds, the head of HR, sat behind a glass desk. He was in his early 40s, impeccably dressed, with an air of efficiency and impatience. "Miss Carter," he greeted, gesturing for her to sit. "You missed your interview." Emma sat down, trying to steady herself. "Yes, sir. I had an emergency. Someone collapsed on the street, and I stayed to help until the paramedics arrived. I understand if that cost me my opportunity, but I wanted you to know that I didn't take being late lightly." Reynolds studied her, fingers tapping lightly against his desk. "That's admirable," he admitted. "But let me ask you this. If you were already employed here, and you had an urgent deadline but chose to help a stranger instead, what do you think would happen?" Emma hesitated. "I would still do the right thing, but I would make sure to communicate with my team and find a solution." He nodded, but his expression remained unreadable. "This position requires extreme reliability. Our executives deal with billion-dollar decisions daily. If an assistant fails to show up on time, that could cost us millions." He exhaled. "Unfortunately, we need someone who can be trusted to be present, no matter the circumstances." Emma felt a pang of humiliation settle deep in her chest. "So that's it?" she asked, voice quiet. "I lose my chance because I helped someone?" Reynolds' gaze softened slightly, but his tone remained firm. "We had hundreds of applicants. Everyone here had to make sacrifices to prove their dedication. You made a choice, Miss Carter. And while it was the morally right one, it wasn't the right one for this company." Emma swallowed hard, her heart sinking. "Thank you for your time," she murmured, rising from the chair. Reynolds simply nodded, already turning back to his computer. Emma walked out of the office in a daze, each step feeling heavier than the last. She had been so sure, so hopeful, that this was her moment. That after years of working dead-end jobs, after struggling through school while juggling 2 part-time gigs, she would finally have her shot at a career that meant something. But now, she was back to square one. Stepping out onto the sidewalk, the rain had stopped, but the city still felt cold. Emma pulled her coat tighter around herself, staring up at the towering building she had dreamed of working in. For the first time since this morning, doubt crept into her mind. Had she made a mistake? Her fingers hovered over her phone, tempted to check the job listings again. Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello. Is this Emma Carter?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes. This is Bellevue Hospital. The man you helped this morning has regained consciousness. He asked to see you." Emma's breath caught. She looked back at Thorne Enterprises, then at the bustling city ahead. The job was gone. But now there was another path opening before her. And she was suddenly very curious to find out where it led. The scent of antiseptic filled the air as Emma stepped into Bellevue Hospital, her footsteps echoing softly against the pristine tile floors. The place was busy, nurses moving briskly, doctors conferring in hushed tones, but Emma's focus was singular. She approached the front desk, clearing her throat. "Hi, I got a call about a patient who asked for me. He collapsed on 5th Avenue this morning." The receptionist checked her notes. "That would be Mr. Thorne. Room 412, down the hall to your right." Emma nodded her thanks and followed the corridor, her heart beating a little too fast. When she reached the door, she hesitated. What exactly was she walking into? A simple thank you? A man curious about the stranger who had stayed by his side? Or something else entirely? She took a deep breath and knocked lightly before pushing the door open. Inside, the man she had saved earlier, Richard Thorne, was sitting up in bed, his suit jacket removed but his dress shirt still crisp, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked composed despite the IV drip attached to his arm. His gaze lifted when she entered, blue eyes sharp and assessing. "You came," he said, his voice smoother than she expected, with a quiet authority beneath it. Emma shrugged, stepping closer. "You asked for me." Richard studied her, then gestured toward the chair by his bedside. "Please, sit." She did, feeling strangely out of place in the sterile hospital room. There was a brief silence before he spoke again. "I assume you missed your interview because of me." His tone wasn't apologetic, just matter of fact. Emma exhaled, leaning back. "Yeah, but I don't regret it." His brows lifted slightly, as if her answer surprised him. "Why?" She tilted her head, considering her words. "Then," she said with quiet certainty, "because life is more important than a job. I can find another opportunity, but if you had died, there wouldn't be a second chance." Richard didn't respond immediately. Instead, he simply watched her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, Emma wondered if she had said something wrong. Then he chuckled, a low, warm sound that caught her off guard. His lips curved slightly as he leaned back against the pillows. "Not many people think that way," he murmured. Emma frowned. "I find that hard to believe." Richard's gaze darkened, as if he were remembering something distant. "Most people would have kept walking. You didn't." She shifted in her chair, suddenly feeling self-conscious under his scrutiny. "I don't know. It wasn't really a choice. I saw someone in trouble, and I acted." Richard tapped his fingers lightly against the blanket, seeming to consider her words. Then, abruptly, he changed the subject. "Have you eaten yet?" Emma blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "I'd like to thank you properly. Join me for dinner." She hesitated, glancing at the IV in his arm. "Are you even allowed to eat real food right now?" His mouth twitched in amusement. "I'll be discharged in a few hours." Emma bit her lip, uncertain. This man, Richard Thorne, was clearly someone powerful. Even sitting in a hospital bed, there was an undeniable presence about him. And yet, she was curious. "All right," she said finally, "but only if you promise not to collapse on me again." Richard smirked. "I'll do my best." And just like that, the course of Emma's life shifted in a direction she never expected. The dim glow of chandeliers bathed the restaurant in golden light, reflecting off the polished marble floors and crisp white tablecloths. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the fine china plate in front of her. She had expected a casual dinner, maybe a small cafe near the hospital, a quiet place to talk. Instead, Richard had brought her to one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. The kind where the waiters wore tailored suits and spoke in hushed, reverent tones. She felt wildly out of place. Across the table, Richard looked completely at ease. He had changed from his hospital attire into a well-fitted black suit, his dark hair neatly combed back. He exuded a quiet confidence, like someone used to commanding rooms, making decisions that shaped industries. Emma took a sip of her water, trying to ignore the glances from the elegantly dressed patrons around them. "So, do you bring all the people who save your life to places like this?" Richard's lips quirked into a small smirk. "No, just you." She let out a breathy chuckle. "Well, I feel honored." Their waiter arrived with a bottle of wine, and Richard ordered for both of them with an effortless grace that made Emma acutely aware of the difference in their worlds. Once they were alone again, he leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Emma, before today, what were you hoping for? What was that interview supposed to be the first step toward?" Emma hesitated, then placed her hands on the table, choosing honesty. "I've always wanted to work in finance," she admitted. "I put myself through school, working 2 jobs, taking night classes. The plan was to start as an assistant, prove myself, and work my way up." She let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "It's not glamorous, but I want to build something. Something stable. Something I can be proud of." Richard watched her carefully, his expression unreadable. "You put yourself through school?" he asked. Emma nodded. "Yeah, no trust fund, no connections, just me some student loans and a lot of determination." For a moment, Richard didn't say anything. Then, with an air of casual revelation, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I see. Well, if things had gone differently this morning, you might have been working for me." Emma frowned. "What do you mean?" Richard tilted his head slightly. "I mean, I'm the CEO of Thorne Enterprises." Silence. Emma froze, her mind struggling to process what he had just said. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. But then, the name clicked. Thorne Enterprises. The company she had been desperate to work for. The interview she had missed. The man she had saved was the same man who could have decided her career. Her stomach dropped. "You," she started, but the words caught in her throat. "You're the CEO?" Richard nodded, watching her reaction with quiet amusement. Emma blinked, her heart racing. She had spent the entire day thinking she had lost her one shot at a future, only to find out that the very man she had sacrificed her interview for was the one person who could have hired her outright. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling sharply. Wow, that's unexpected." Richard studied her for a moment, then said, "You impressed me today." Emma let out a short laugh, still in mild shock. "I impressed you? I thought you just said I was unreliable for missing an important meeting." His expression softened slightly. "You weren't unreliable. You made a choice, a rare one." Emma swallowed, her mind still reeling. Then, Richard leaned forward, his voice calm but undeniably firm. "I want to offer you a job." Emma stared at him, her pulse hammering in her ears. "A job?" she repeated, almost not trusting what she had just heard. Richard nodded. "A trial period. No interview, no standard process. Just you proving what you're capable of." Emma's breath caught. This was everything she had worked for, a chance to step into the world she had fought so hard to enter. And yet, something inside her hesitated. She looked down at her hands, her mind torn. "That's incredibly generous," she said carefully. "But I don't want to be given a job just because I happen to be in the right place at the right time." Richard didn't look surprised by her response. If anything, his smirk deepened, as if he had expected her to say that. "Then don't take it as a favor," he said simply. "Take it as a challenge. Prove that you belong there." Emma bit her lip, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This could change everything. But was she ready for it? Emma stood in front of the Thorne Enterprises skyscraper, staring up at the glass facade that reflected the morning sun. A week ago, she had walked away from this building in defeat, convinced that she had lost her only shot. Now she was stepping inside not as a desperate job applicant, but as an intern with something to prove. She exhaled sharply and pushed through the doors. The lobby was a sea of power suits and confident strides, a world where no one hesitated, no one faltered. She refused to be the exception. At the receptionist's desk, a woman with sharp cheekbones and a perfectly tailored dress glanced up. "Ms. Carter?" Emma nodded. "Follow me. Mr. Thorne is expecting you." Emma squared her shoulders and walked with purpose, though her heart pounded. Richard's office was sleek and modern, all glass, dark wood, and quiet authority. He stood near the window, looking out at the city skyline, hands in his pockets. "You're early," he noted, turning to face her. Emma lifted her chin slightly. "I figured I should set the right impression." A flicker of approval crossed his face before he gestured toward a chair. "Sit." She did, gripping her notebook tightly, prepared for some kind of formal orientation speech. Instead, Richard leaned against his desk and said, "Tell me what you want out of this." Emma hesitated for only a second. "I want to prove I deserve to be here. I don't want to be given anything I haven't earned." Richard studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Because no one here is going to take it easy on you." That was exactly what she wanted to hear. He handed her a folder. "Your internship is temporary. 6 weeks. If you succeed, you stay. If you don't," he let the sentence hang in the air. Emma took the folder, gripping it tightly. "I won't give you a reason to let me go." His lips quirked slightly. "Let's see if you can back that up." From the moment Emma stepped into her department, she could feel the weight of judgment. The other interns, most from Ivy League schools, with impeccable resumes and last names that opened doors, made it clear that they considered her an outsider. "She's the CEO's special case," she overheard one of them whisper. "Think she actually got in on merit," another muttered. Emma refused to react. She had expected this. She welcomed it. If they wanted to doubt her, she'd make sure she outworked every single one of them. She stayed late, arrived early, took on extra assignments, and made no excuses. When an opportunity arose to present financial projections for an upcoming project, she volunteered, even when she knew the others expected her to fail. She didn't. When she finished her presentation, the silence in the conference room was thick. Then, Richard, who had been sitting at the far end of the table, listening intently, smirked slightly and nodded. "Solid work, Carter." It was the first acknowledgement she had received from him in weeks, and though it was brief, it sent a thrill through her chest. The others had no choice but to take her seriously after that. The more Emma worked, the more she noticed something about Richard, something beyond the cold, intimidating CEO persona. He wasn't just demanding, he was deeply invested in his work. He noticed things others didn't. When an analyst miscalculated a report, he caught the mistake instantly. When Emma hesitated on a financial strategy question, he didn't give her the answer, he made her figure it out herself. It was frustrating and exhilarating. The rare moments when their interactions turned personal caught Emma off guard. One evening, after most of the office had cleared out, she walked past his open door. "You're still here?" he asked, glancing up from his laptop. She held up a stack of files, trying to prove I belong. His expression softened just slightly. "You already do." She knew he meant professionally, but it still made her heart race. It started as a low hum of awareness, something she ignored at first. Then it became harder. The way he looked at her during meetings, thoughtful, interested, a little amused. The way their casual interactions sometimes stretched longer than necessary. The way her pulse picked up every time she heard his voice. She didn't know if it was admiration or something deeper. But she knew it was dangerous. This was her boss. This was the man who held her career in his hands. She couldn't afford distractions. And yet, she couldn't stop thinking about him. Emma shoved the feelings down and focused on the work. Because if she let herself fall, it would be a long way down. Emma had always prided herself on being rational. She had spent years focusing on her career, pushing through obstacles, and never letting emotions cloud her judgment. But Richard Thorne was making that impossible. She wasn't sure when it started. Maybe it was the late nights, the quiet moments when the office emptied, leaving just the two of them, working side by side in companionable silence. Maybe it was the way he challenged her, pushing her to think deeper, be better. Or maybe it was just him. The way his sharp blue eyes softened when she spoke. The rare but genuine smirk when she surprised him with an idea he hadn't considered. The way he always seemed to notice her, even in a room full of people. Emma tried to ignore it. She reminded herself, he's your boss. This is dangerous. He would never see you that way. And yet, there was something there. She saw it in the way his gaze lingered just a second too long. The way his voice softened when he said her name. The way he seemed to fight something within himself whenever they were alone. She wasn't imagining it. But that didn't mean it could happen. So, she buried it. She focused on work, on proving herself, on pretending she didn't feel like gravity shifted whenever he was near. The turning point came when a major investment deal collapsed unexpectedly. Emma had been in the conference room when the news broke. One of their biggest clients was pulling out of a multi-million-dollar project, and the fallout would be catastrophic. Tension crackled in the air as the senior executive scrambled for solutions. Richard sat at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. But Emma could see the tightness in his jaw. He was already calculating the damage, looking for a way out. And then, before she could think twice, she spoke up. "What if we restructure the deal?" The room went silent. Emma swallowed, feeling the weight of every stare. She wasn't supposed to be talking. She was an intern. Richard's gaze snapped to hers. "Explain." Emma straightened in her chair. "The client is backing out because of the upfront risk. But if we adjust the terms, offer them a performance-based payout model instead of an initial investment, they might reconsider." The executives exchanged skeptical glances. "That would require us to take on a portion of the risk ourselves," one of them pointed out. "Yes," Emma admitted, pulse racing. "But it also shows confidence in our own projections. And if it works, we don't just save the deal, we strengthen our relationship with the client." Silence. Then Richard smirked. "That," he said, "is a damn good idea." He turned to his team. "Work on the numbers. If the projections hold, we pitch this by the end of the day." Emma barely processed what had just happened. But later, when the deal was salvaged and everyone else had left for the night, Richard found her in the hallway. "You impressed me today," he said quietly. Emma looked up at him, heart pounding. "I just did what I thought was right." Richard exhaled, studying her like he was seeing her in a new light. "I want you on my team permanently," he said. "Not as an intern, as my executive assistant." Emma froze. This was everything she had worked for, a real position, a place at the table. But it also meant staying close to him. And that was starting to feel more dangerous than anything else. She accepted the job. Of course she did. And things should have gone back to normal. But they didn't. Because now there were even more late nights, more quiet moments, more stolen glances across the office. Emma caught Richard watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. He brushed past her in the hallways, the briefest touch sending electricity through her skin. And every time she thought, say something. Ask him. Figure out what this is. But she never did. Because what if she was wrong? What if this was just her imagination? What if he didn't feel the same way? But then, one evening, when the office was nearly empty, Richard stopped in her doorway. "You should go home," he said. Emma glanced up from her desk, raising an eyebrow. "You should too." His lips curved slightly, but he didn't move. Instead, he hesitated. And that was new. Richard Thorne never hesitated. "Emma," he said, his voice quieter than usual. She straightened, her pulse suddenly thudding in her ears. For a second, she swore she saw it, the flicker of something in his expression, the hesitation, the pull, the possibility. Say something, she thought. Ask him. But then, his expression hardened. And just like that, the moment was gone. "See you tomorrow," he said. And then he walked away. Emma sat there, staring after him, knowing, just knowing, that whatever was happening between them, he was fighting it just as much as she was. The tension between them had become impossible to ignore. Weeks passed, filled with the same lingering glances, the same unspoken words. But Richard remained distant, keeping their relationship strictly professional, until the night everything changed. It was late. The office was empty, except for the two of them. Emma was at her desk, typing away, when she heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching. She looked up to find Richard standing in the doorway, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up, a rare sight of vulnerability. "You should go home," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "So should you," he countered. A silence stretched between them, thick with something unspoken, undeniable. Then, finally, Richard took a breath and stepped closer. "I can't keep pretending," he said, his voice low, intentional. Emma's heart stilled. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw the conflict, the hesitation, but also the certainty. "I tried," he admitted. "I tried to keep my distance. I told myself it was the right thing to do. But the truth is," he exhaled, his gaze never leaving hers, "I don't want distance, Emma. Not with you." She felt her world tilt, her carefully built walls crumbling in an instant. "Richard," she hesitated, every rational thought screaming at her to be cautious. But then she thought about all the moments leading up to this one, the late nights, the stolen glances, the unspoken understanding between them. And suddenly, caution didn't matter anymore. Because the truth was, she had been falling for him all along. A slow, relieved smile crossed Richard's face, as if he had been waiting, hoping, for her to say those words. He reached for her then, and she didn't pull away. Not this time. Navigating their relationship within the company wasn't easy, but they found a balance, professional in the office, deeply connected outside of it. They didn't hide what they had, but they also didn't let it interfere with their work. And despite her initial fears, Emma proved herself, not as the woman dating the CEO, but as someone who had earned her place. Months passed. Seasons changed. And then, 1 year later, everything came full circle. The rooftop restaurant was quiet, the New York skyline stretching endlessly beyond them. Candlelight flickered across their table, reflecting in Richard's blue eyes as he watched her with something deeper than admiration, something certain, unshakable. Emma laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're acting strange tonight." Richard smirked. "Strange?" She gestured at the private table, the exquisite meal, the soft music playing in the background. "Even for you, this is a bit much." Richard exhaled, suddenly looking almost nervous. Emma's teasing smile faltered. "Richard?" He reached into his jacket pocket, and, before she could fully process what was happening, produced a velvet box. Her breath caught. Slowly, he opened it, revealing a simple yet stunning diamond ring. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. "Marry me," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. She blinked, her heart pounding. "Richard, I knew from the moment you stayed by my side that day," he continued, his expression soft yet certain. "You didn't know who I was, but you stayed. And every day since, you've proven the kind of person you are, determined, brilliant, kind." He paused, his smirk returning, and incredibly stubborn. Emma let out a watery laugh, her chest tightening. "I don't want to spend another day pretending I don't need you," he admitted. "Because I do, Emma. In every way." Tears pricked her eyes, her heart overflowing. There was only one answer. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. Richard let out a relieved chuckle, standing and pulling her into his arms before slipping the ring onto her finger. The city sparkled behind them, but nothing shone brighter than the future unfolding before them. A future built on kindness, perseverance, and love. A future they would face together. And so, what started as an act of kindness on a rainy morning became the beginning of a love story neither of them expected but both desperately needed. Emma and Richard's journey was one of sacrifice, resilience, and taking chances, not just on careers, but on each other. Because sometimes the things we fear losing the most lead us to exactly where we're meant to be. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story of love, fate, and perseverance, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more stories that touch your heart and inspire your soul. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.